but friendly, if you're recording, they can have access to the start if they've missed it. Okay, I see recording started as well. Just to confirm, are you seeing my cover slide that says multi-energy offering?
Yes, yes.
All right, perfect. So as I'm kicking off, I'm not able to see the screen if any hands are coming up. So if you do have a question, a comment, please put your mic on and you can ask while I'm going through the presentation. I'm happy to discuss as we go along. No need to wait till the end. The agenda for today, I have a brief introduction, give an overview of the current South African energy sector. We know it's not the brightest at the moment, but there are opportunities that are arising from the challenges, the current challenges in the energy sector. TotalEnergies is looking at energy offerings differently and expanding the energy offerings. Can we please mute unless there's a question? And then I'll dive a bit into our renewables offering on solar, wind, and battery storage, as well as some of the global projects that we are building, and we look for solutions for South Africa as well. Introduction on myself. My name's Ashirvad Sookun. I'm the Renewable Explorer for TotalEnergies in South Africa. Essentially, what that means is I look at new business development for our solar, wind, battery storage solutions, as well as the multi-energy offering that I will be talking to you about today. Moving on, so kicking off with the South African energy sector. I know there is no shortage at the moment of the challenges or the news, or what we see in the news, what we see in the newspapers. We do have an energy sector at the moment which isn't able to provide enough supply for the demand that the country currently does have. That's why we are in a load shedding situation. What that means, though, is that new solutions will be developed for the country's energy requirements going into the future. And so we need to set our strategies and decisions and investment decisions now to decide how our energy context, our energy environment in the country is going to look like in 2030 and 2050. If you look at the graph that I have on the left-hand side, our mix for energy in the country at the moment is heavily based on coal. There are renewables being built. There is hydro in operation, nuclear in operation, but still heavily dominated by the coal sector. Although as we move forward to 2030, the dominance of coal still remains, but the proportion of that coal starts to get smaller as more renewables come in, more sustainable energy comes in, more lower cost power comes in. Sounds easier than it is, because if you look at my map in the middle, the power grid in South Africa has traditionally or historically been designed to extract the power that comes from the coal power stations in the Mpumalanga region and distribute this across the country. Our new wind and solar solutions tend to be situated in the Northern Cape, the Western Cape, and the Eastern Cape of the country. This is a new challenge for Eskom in that traditionally Eskom never designed the transmission grid to be able to extract power from these regions. So at the moment, we have a situation where the IPPs in the country are looking to build these, make massive investments into these solar and wind plants in these regions. However, we don't have, the country or Eskom doesn't have transmission capacity to get that power out of these regions and to customers. The transmission development plan uh, is being implemented to do this, but this isn't something that can change in the next year or two. This will be a 10-year development plan. Why I give this background is that we need to start looking at our energy requirements, looking at our energy investments to be able to set the country's energy future up to be sustainable, to be low cost, to be decentralized such that energy um, can be extracted from anywhere in the country as well.
My skin is in the boude. Yes, is that when my first oorals. My
Anton, sorry. Okay, thanks. TotalEnergies in South Africa has been setting ourselves up for a diversified energy requirement, not just in South Africa, but globally. In South Africa, you might not have previously been aware. I mean, your interactions with TotalEnergies would have primarily looked at the fuel and lubricants offering, but with our name change from Total to TotalEnergies in recent years, and what you would have seen is that we've expanded not just um, uh, from the oil and gas perspective, but now into the energy, electricity, uh, green energy space. So looking at solar, looking at wind, looking at hydrogen, looking at biofuels, looking at biogas, very much the energy of the future. Um, as we move forward and the requirements for oil start to decrease, the requirements for fossil fuel power start to decrease, or high carbon power starts to decrease. A lot of these energy options start to make more sense and start to become lower cost, start to become more mainstream and accessible to everyone in the country as well. South Africa, more specifically, I mean, we in the private sector also need to think about our own security, our own independence, uh, in the case that we're looking after our own power supply where we can. On-site on-site solar is being built. I can guarantee almost 90% of you have either panels, generators, or battery at your site as well, not just for the low carbon benefits or with solar, the low cost energy, but also for the security benefits. TotalEnergies in South Africa, you know that we have a huge service station network. We also have a huge lubricants and gas capability that we uh, produce down in Durban and move into the rest of Southern Africa as well. But also on our renewable side, we operate a 86 megawatt solar PV plant in the Northern Cape, and we're building a number of other large solar PV, wind, and battery storage plants as well. In the public sector, we've been successful in the REAP bid rounds as well as the risk mitigation bid rounds. In the private sector for Sasol Air Liquide, we're building 120 megawatts of solar as well as 140 megawatts of wind. And then for on-site power as well, we're building a 17 megawatt solar PV plant, as well as smaller 700 kilowatt, 1 megawatt solar PV plants on rooftops. On the gas side, we're developing LNG in Mozambique. We're building LNG to power plants in Mozambique and looking to wheel that into South Africa as well. And then off the coast of Mossel Bay, off the coast of Cape Town, we're developing a number of gas discoveries that we'd look for in the future for South Africa to have gas available domestically and able to supply domestic gas to the off-takers in South Africa as well as Eskom's power plants. So really, our country is set up really well for diversified electricity provision, where there's a number of gas finds which we can have domestic gas with, and the levels of solar radiation in the country, the levels of wind yield in the country make us one of the most attractive destinations globally to be able to provide renewable energy. Um, with us in Namibia, we're one of the most attractive locations for green hydrogen production because of the low cost of solar and wind power we can develop in the country. So we ask ourselves, why are we so reliant on coal power when we actually have the opportunity to transition really, really well in this country? Um, Quickly, a bit of information on TotalEnergies in the country. We've been set up in the country for over 70 years now. We don't plan to move out of the country. We're invested very heavily in South Africa. We're a BEE level 1 company, and we look to expand our footprint in South Africa. As I said, not just in the oil and gas sector, but also in the renewable space, the gas finds off the South African coast, of the Mozambican coast. Uh, big investments for the long term. So I've been talking about this multi-energy strategy that TotalEnergies has, and we've developed globally, not just for South Africa, but South Africa becomes one of our big pilot cases for this globally. As I said, the name changed from Total to TotalEnergies recently, and what this means is the series of energy types that you see on the screen, we're moving from the left-hand side very much to the right-hand side. You see that in our logo on the top right of the corner. If you wondered about those colors in our logo, you can see that each of the energies that you see in the middle of the screen is represented by color in that logo as well. It's how intentional, it's an indication of how intentional we are in this green energy transition, in this multi-energy offering. We really hope that in the next few years, you don't just associate the TotalEnergies brand with fuel and lubes, but also with green energy across the value chain. So TotalEnergies as a global company has signed up to net zero by 2050. And it's a really big statement for traditionally oil company to make. But what that means is at least 50% of our revenue by 2050, of our power generation by 2050, will come from green energies. To do this, we also need to transition with our customers. Our customers, such as yourselves, who look to become greener and less carbon intensive in the future, we look to transition to net zero with yourselves as we reduce your scope 1, as we help to reduce your scope 1 and 2 emissions, our scope 3 emissions go down as well. Very much a partnership. We've set up our company and our global structure to cater to each of these energy offerings. Exploration and production, these are the guys in TotalEnergies that do the deep sea drilling, get the gas, get the oil out for downstream purposes. Gas, renewables, and power, which is the division that I belong to. We develop solar power, wind power, investing in clean hydrogen, biogas, biofuels, LNG. And then we also have our refining and chemical sector. These run the refineries and produce the fuels from the oil that we get upstream. Marketing and services, this is the division that you primarily would be quite familiar with. Hendrik, Lawrence, and team are part of our marketing and services division that bring you the fuel and lubricants that you do distribute to your customers as well. As part of our new strategy, as part of our multi-energy strategy, we look to be a part of that entire value chain of bringing energy to our customers. What you see on the right-hand side there is how our transition in proportions of energies will start to change. So in 2021, where a vast portion of our income, of our business, is the red bit on the right-hand side you see in oil, and then also in LNG and gas. And you see a tiny 2% there in new molecules. As we move towards 2050, 50% of that energy mix needs to be from renewables and electricity. So very much changing the face of the company that you have been familiar with over the years, but still bringing that big brand, big reputation, and big capabilities in the brand that you can trust. How are we doing this? We've been growing through acquisitions to bring these renewable energies, these green energy capabilities into the company. Sun Power Panels, which is the largest panel manufacturer in the world, has been acquired by TotalEnergies. Saft Batteries for battery storage, which is the third largest battery storage manufacturer in the world, is also a TotalEnergies company. And through the years, we've been acquiring wind energy companies, LNG companies, making partnerships in green hydrogen with Adani Green Power in India, other large IPPs globally as well. In order to realize this multi-energy strategy that we talk about, what we need to think about, and you as well, in terms of customers that you look at, is how do our customer businesses operate? What are the requirements through the entire value chain? At this point, we might be providing them with fuel and lubricants for their mobility requirements, but on their industrial sites, there's power requirements they need. There's on-site solar that can be done. Wind, okay, maybe a bit more difficult on site, but that can be done through a wheeling basis. On-site solar can be backed up by on-site battery storage. And when industrial sites start doing this, then with on-site solar and battery storage, they've reduced their carbon footprints, they've reduced their reliance on grid power, they've increased the amount of security or control they have over the power supply that they need to operate their businesses. At the moment, the large power users are wheeling or looking at building solar plants or wind plants in the Cape and wheeling power to their sites. It's a great solution, but the inherent risk in this is the Eskom grid. If you are wheeling power, you're still subject to curtailment or load shedding. And if the grid goes down, you aren't able to get the power from those wheeling sites to your site. So this is where companies that do have enough land available on site for solar and battery storage really are protecting themselves and looking at putting down solar and putting down battery storage. The solar is low cost to put down. The battery storage brings the cost of that up a bit. Not entirely fair to compare battery storage tariffs with grid tariffs. It makes more sense to look at comparing the price of battery storage with the cost of unserved energy. So on your sites where there's refrigeration, where you might lose product, where production will stop when the grid goes down, what's the cost of that? And how can battery storage actually save you those losses? Most operators haven't adequately sized that yet. I mean, it's hard to do the modeling. We've done modeling for a mine site in 2022 that looked at the amount of production losses. So they looked at production losses in tons that they experienced through grid curtailment or load shedding last year. And for this particular mine, they lost 800 million rand in production in 2022, which is just unfathomable. But putting down solar, putting down battery storage in their site, they can start to limit the amount of losses that they have there. The amount of curtailment or load shedding we had in 2021 was the largest ever in record. The amount that we've had in 2022 eclipsed that significantly. And in 2023, we've already gone well past the entire year's load shedding experienced in 2022. So there's solutions that we need to think about. Like I say, at the immediate stage, solar and battery storage on site, even fuels on site. Fuels start to get, there's opportunities for greener fuels now, biofuels, low carbon fuels, reduce fuel usage through efficient processes. And then in the longer term, green gases start to become available, green hydrogen, biogases, as we make LNG available from Mozambique and build those gas to power plants. Gas power, which is able to provide baseload power to the call it mid-merit, but it could be used at a better efficiency than the diesel power generators to supply the country's peak needs, also start to come into play. And then that gas, when compared in carbon emissions to coal, is 50%, represents 50% of the same carbon emissions that you would get if you burnt coal. So we start to reduce our carbon emissions, reduce our reliance on coal, and increase our energy sustainability. But very much what I'm trying to get across in this picture is it's not a solution that gets rolled out tomorrow, but it's a long-term solution to get ourselves and you to net zero by 2050. There's solutions that we can look at today, there's solutions we can look at in the middle term, there's solutions we can look up in the longer term. But it's very much strategic direction that needs to be made now that that sets us up to to walk the roadmap that'll get us to net zero by 2050. We've been implementing hybrid solutions on mines, not just globally, hybrid solutions, and not just globally, but also in South Africa. I spoke about the Sasol Air Liquid project earlier, Teresa Mine. We're also doing a project in the Free State, as well as some of the hospital groups that are based in South Africa at the moment as well. What this will mean is we provide solar and wind solutions, but also look at other green energy options. We're looking at developing biofuels. What that means is the agricultural sector will start to get involved. We need green feedstocks. We need supply to be able to make biofuels. And then we also start looking at off-takers for those biofuels, and we start to create a value chain around biofuels for the country. Hydrogen also becomes a solution. Like I said, South Africa and Namibia and Chile are really, really ideally situated countries for green hydrogen. South Africa and Namibia, in terms of Africa, more closely related to Europe for exports, huge opportunities coming forward in green hydrogen. Companies will need to look at what our energy mix, what are the different energies that we're using, what contribution is it, do they have to carbon emissions, how can we start to diversify that energy mix to bring down our carbon emissions. The energy mix that you use currently will change dramatically by 2030. We don't see it immediately, but the amount of electric vehicles on the road, the requirement for EV charging will start to increase. We've started to see it increase already this year. The prices of those EVs will come down. The implementations of batteries into industrial equipment, into agricultural equipment, into mining equipment start to go up. And then these opportunities and avenues to reduce our carbon footprint start to increase. Like I said earlier, it isn't a solution that can be implemented tomorrow. It's a long road that needs to be walked. So immediately, there could be solutions that are looked at in the short term. When we look at energy crises, fuel is still required, but look at creating efficiency in that, reducing the carbon offsets. And then later on, looking at solar, looking at wind, looking at green hydrogen, looking at biofuels. But again, not a solution that happens overnight, but one that we need to make decisions now for the long term. So my specific background is in the renewable energies. So I'll talk a bit more on renewable energies, but other questions around the biofuels, LNGs and CNGs, Total Energies does have a new energies team here that I'll be happy to uh, put any of you in contact with. My specialty or ability to answer questions here will be more around the solar, the wind, the battery storage offerings. To set ourselves up for this energy transition, Total Energies has set some really, really insane, what I would call insane targets, but targets that we are reaching in terms of operational solar and wind power. Um, by 2022, we targeted 16 gigawatts of operational solar and wind globally. We're currently at 17 gigawatts now. We're targeting 35 gigawatts and 100 gigawatts by 2030. Just to the gigawatt numbers might not make sense, but South Africa's current demand, I would estimate, is around 26,000 megawatts to 26 gigawatts. Um, these numbers, of course, are global, but a good portion of these would start to come for Total Energies from South Africa as we build our solar projects, our wind projects, our gas to power projects as well. The projects that we are bringing in terms of making those numbers that I spoke about on the previous side, on the solar side, there's two types of offerings. Large scale solar farms where we would bring the solar site, permit the solar site, build a solar plant on that site, build a grid connection to Eskom, and then wheel the power across the electricity grid to your site. In the agri sector, I think the capacity of these sites might be actually too large. These are more the 50 to 75 to 100 to 200 megawatt sites. What makes more sense for the agri sector is on-site solar. So these are carport mounted solar panels, rooftop mounted solar panels. If there's enough space in the ground, ground mounted panels. And these are typically the on-site solar is behind the meter, so doesn't rely on Eskom for wheeling, doesn't need to go through the difficult processes for the Eskom grid connections and the like, and it gives you a bit more control of the power that you have on your site. In terms of wind, okay, South Africa, I won't talk too much about offshore because there's just so much of onshore wind opportunity and onshore solar as well. Battery storage becomes more of a discussion for us in South Africa as well, in that we've realized that, and I'll talk a bit about hybrid solutions just now, in that your on-site solar, your rooftop solar needs a grid reference to operate. So if there is load shedding, your solar does go down if there aren't battery storage solutions also available on site. So battery storage is becoming a much more critical and talked about option that's needed in South Africa as well. These on-site PPA, these on-site solutions, like I said, rooftop, carport, ground-mounted, can give you the ability to charge, have EV chargers on your sites as well that are powered by the solar PV and battery storage solutions. In essence, these drive down carbon emissions, allows you to be greener. It's a visible representation of your intention to move to greener energy. And then also it reduces your tariffs from Eskom. Some of the large projects that we are doing in terms of solar PV. Hi.
Ash, sorry to interrupt. I've got a question about the battery storage. Now, I think the local battery storage, the crime around that is escalating. What is the chances of having an off-site battery storage? Or is this now dependent on the transmission, cables and things like that? But is that a technology that's available or that can be developed?
Yeah. So off-site battery storage is available. We're building TotalEnergies is building 450 megawatt hours of battery storage two-wheel to the grid in South Africa. Unfortunately, if there are load shedding events and the grid goes down, you aren't able to get access to that power. So the real security for you on your specific site means that the battery storage needs to be on your site. 100% crime and theft of not only battery storage, but also panels, also inverters is on the rise. It is an unfortunate situation in the country at the moment. So, I mean, on projects that we look at, security just really needs to be heightened. On sites where we put down solar panels and our big inverter systems, we need 24-hour security on those sites. I hope I've answered your question in that, yes, offsite is available, but it doesn't give you that security that you would require from battery storage.
Okay, thanks.
The offsite, the large batteries that I spoke about that we're building, that's offsite, what that actually looks to do is assist Eskom in managing the peaks. So at the moment, when peak power demand does come in the mornings and the evenings, and Eskom's power generation might not have enough capacity to meet the demands, what you can have is strategically located batteries that can supplement the supply into the grid. You can charge them during the low demand times and then have them ready to bring the power online to meet energy demand during the peak the peak energy times or the peak energy demand times of our users. As much as I am a supporter or developer of solar and wind, the difficulty behind solar and wind power is that it's intermittent power. So solar is available only during the day, only during sunlight hours of the day. If it's cloudy, the power generation from those plants do decrease. Wind, thankfully, in South Africa, the wind yields actually are available more during the evening periods. So it helps us to round off that power requirement, but you still aren't assured of the power being delivered. And that's where battery storage starts to provide more security or buffer to take in these power, the power being generated during the off-peak times of the day and get it to the consumers during the peak hours of the day. The large battery storage actually would also help Eskom in alleviating the grid capacity constraints in the Northern Cape, where they aren't able to get power out of the Northern Cape anymore because those lines have reached their capacity. But the big solar plants that are developing power during the day, if battery storage is installed in the Northern Cape, the power generated from the solar plants can be put into these batteries during the day, and then during the evening peaks can be evacuated into the grid when it's actually needed. So what could your on-site, depending on the size of your requirement, power solution look like? What we've helped customers design is diversified solutions on site. So solar PV, battery storage, and diesel generators. Depending on the size, the land available, the rooftop size available, it would limit your PV, but your PV could be essential in reducing your carbon footprint and also reducing your energy spend. But the real sustainable solution is balancing this between your PV usage, battery usage, and when required, the diesel generator. Of course, you want to maximize your PV usage, maximize your battery usage, and then minimize your diesel generator usage only when you actually do need it. But all of these actually can be done on your site behind the meter, and then gives your sites or your customer sites a lot more independence of the outage events that do come from Eskom. TotalEnergies, how we bringing these solutions to our customers, we offer power purchase agreement solutions. So even though we own the solar panel manufacturer or the battery manufacturer, we don't necessarily sell a large battery or panel equipment to your customer. What we do is we sell the electrons. So on your side, we will invest the capital that's required to install the solar panels, install the battery storage, and we'll sell the electrons to you. So you won't need to put up any capital investment for these solutions. We'll do the capital investment, we'll do the design, we'll do the operations of that plant. So essentially what this does at the moment, when lots of power users in the country are looking at investing large sums of capital into solar, into batteries, that capital could be invested much more efficiently in your own core businesses and outsource the risk and the operation of solar plants or energy to an IPP. And TotalEnergies looks to be that person or that partner that when you need fuel, we'll supply the fuel. When you need electricity, we'll supply the energy. We'll supply the molecules to the fuel, the electrons to the energy. These typical on-site solutions that we look at in terms of power purchase agreements for solar run for 15 or 20 years. The longer the power purchase agreement, the lower the tariff we can offer you. We offer you a lower than Eskom tariff even from year one. So you see a savings on your electricity bill even in year one without investing any capital. And that savings that you see between your electricity spend versus what you would normally have spent on Eskom, it increases each year going forward because our escalations on tariffs won't be linked to the large escalations that you've been seeing, that the country has been seeing from Eskom in recent years, and which we expect to continue from Eskom in years going forward as their revenue declines, but their cost base increases as they continue to run those coal power stations with a diminished cost base, with a diminished user base as well. I'll pause on this power purchase agreement page just to understand if there's any questions from the floor. Do you understand the concept of power purchase agreements and capital investment from TotalEnergies side?
Ash, Anton Kutsia here from Dynamic Supplies and Solutions. In terms of because the schematic that you showed there is a hybrid system. So in terms of, say, a 100 kilowatt plant with battery storage for about 4 hours, could you maybe just give us an idea of what the PPA tariff will be to Total?
If you can drop me a mail after, I can do a quick assessment on where the location of your site would be, and what sort of tariff could come in there. But I would tell you that on the solar side of that tariff, on the PPA side, we would only propose a tariff that's lower than your current Eskom tariff. And then depending on how ideal your site is, we'll get that lower and lower and lower, as low as we can. For the battery solution, what we do is we don't combine that with the PPA. We provide a lease price for the batteries. So you don't pay for the full capital investment in the batteries. What you pay for is the energy availability on those batteries. That, unfortunately, the battery lease price is a fair amount higher than what the solar PPA tariff and the Eskom tariff is. But it's very much on a case-by-case basis, so it's very hard for me to give you a tariff off the cuff on that one. But I'll share my contact details with you and happy to look at a specific solution.
Thank you, Ash.
Just looking at a comment I see from Jack, Total Strategies, motor equip localization. It's actually both, Jack. So we're looking to the really the big positive from the breadth of the reach that TotalEnergies has is that we're providing the big power solutions for the large power users in the country, but also to Eskom as well. So we've participated in the REAP bid rounds where we'd be building solar, we'll be building battery storage for Eskom and providing that for the country, not to a specific power user. But at the same time, those massive power solutions we're pushing through, we're also looking at the smaller on-site solutions for specific power users. So very much on both extremes of the power supply, the power demand environment. And also think about the private users, as you and as many of even the smaller users are installing solar, transitioning away from Eskom. How that helps the bigger energy crisis in the country is as the pressure is reduced from Eskom's demand, as you diversify your energy mix, the pressure on the need from Eskom also decreases. So they're able to do the required maintenance required. They're able to spend to put more units down so they can do the right maintenance and expansion so that they can get their power supply also up and running in a better situation than it currently is. It's very much a solution that's required from all parts of the energy sector in the country. Hybrid solutions I'll touch on quickly. So there's different types of hybrid solutions that we would develop. There's good on-grid solutions where you have solar power, and in certain areas, depending on whether you buy from Eskom or municipality, if you have excess solar power available on your site, you can send that back to the grid. That's what we call good on-grid solutions. Then there's bad on-grid solutions where, okay, at Eskom, at the moment in the country, what we describe our grid as is a bad on-grid where the grid isn't available from time to time. This is where battery backups are needed, generator backups are needed. And then there's complete off-grid solutions as well. So here, I would stress that this does cost a lot more, and it does require quite a bit more of investment, but larger solar than your energy requirements, larger battery needed to provide you with the security, and then also gensets for extended days if there's cloud, if there's rain, and your solar isn't able to produce and isn't able to charge your batteries, gensets are also required there. Total's battery solutions. So we bring in SAFT batteries. These have they typically range from the smaller size for smaller battery requirements to the very large size. So we can bring in entire containers with battery storage solutions that can plug into your reticulation and provide you with battery backup. Again, though, I stress that the battery component does cost a bit more in terms of tariff, but what it provides you with is that energy security. You can typically see these battery storage solutions used for large power users, but also on your sites where there's heisters, there's electric vehicles, electric chargers required. Those battery solutions come in. If you have solar, you can charge those batteries through the solar, make that completely independent of Eskom. Okay, on the boat side, okay, we wouldn't talk too much about that. And we've started to implement these in a number of countries as well. Okay, this map I need to update because in South Africa as well, we've started to develop our large battery solution for Eskom as well. In conclusion, and I want to leave some time for questions as well. In South Africa, as I kicked off with, we have challenges in the country, but we also are really well set up for a diversified energy mix. We need to make use of our natural resources. And yes, Gwede Mantashe would say that that's coal, but from a renewable energy perspective, I'm not saying that there isn't a place for coal. What I'm saying is that coal shouldn't be our dominant energy source. We start to reduce our cost of energy and our energy sustainability when we have multiple energy sources providing supply into the energy mix. So let's make use of the gas reserves that we've found that we can bring onshore. Let's make use of the large solar radiation available in the country, the high wind yield available in the country. Let's make use of the gas that we can get from Mozambique. We have an energy grid that's being expanded in the country. We're expanding the gas pipelines in the country, the oil pipelines in the country as well. What this means is that there's multi-energy solutions that would be required. So for businesses that are looking for energy security, for green energy, for lower cost energy, it really needs to think of the entire portfolio of solutions. And TotalEnergies in the country is setting itself up to be able to provide that sort of partnership to our customers, where we can bring in our R&D capabilities as well to help our partners actually look at what type of energy solution, what type of sizing, what type of capacities make sense for your size of business, make sense for your location of business. So really happy to discuss with you solutions in improving our energy sector, improving our energy supply, improving your energy security. And I leave you with that. I will share the presentation with you, the slides with you guys. But in the few minutes we have left, I'd like to leave some time for questions if you have any. I hope it has been interesting. I hope I have been able to pique your interest over the past 50 minutes. And happy to chat to you. Even if there aren't questions now, I will have my details on the presentation pack.
Good afternoon.
That I'll share with you.
Question
Hi, Johan. Yep.
Good afternoon, Mats. There is a
Mats.
question.
Okay.
Thank you. Good presentation, Mats Journell here, Group MD from Viking Aquaculture Sea Harvest.
Mm-hmm.
We are in the process of we have wind turbines on our farms, etc. But we are keen to get rid of the Eskom problem. Do you think, as a professional, it's worth investing in batteries over a 3 to 5 year cycle, or do you think Eskom will sort out its, let's not use a bad word, but let's sort out its the business in the next 3 years?
I need to be diplomatic in this response, but I think the modeling that we've done and that the discussions that we've had with Eskom directly, and I've spent the first half of my career at Eskom, so I understand their decision-making processes as well. What we need to be aware of when Eskom does put any numbers or solutions out, it's very optimistic. The views I've seen, the expectations I've seen coming out of Eskom look at a 5 to 6 year period before we can see an end to load shedding, and that's coming from Eskom unofficially. I tend to think Eskom also looks at it a bit more optimistically, so I think a little bit longer than that. What's important for your specific business to look at is when you're thinking about the battery storage investment is to model the costs that you would be paying for the battery storage investment versus the cost of increasing power, the cost of losses in terms of curtailment or outages to your business. So if you're able to quantify the cost of those losses, you can start to think about the battery storage investment. For a large mine that I'm currently doing that specific modeling for, they would look to go into a 15-year lease for large batteries. This would be an 80 megawatt hour battery. With using 2022's load shedding, let's say 2022's outages and the impact that had on their business, we could reach break even on the battery storage investment in year 4, which means that post year 4, any benefit that you get on savings to avoid curtailment or even arbitrage savings will be a bonus to you. So I think the battery storage investment, depending on the size of your power requirement, does make sense. I've seen the modeling around it. Know that it's not only used for to avoid avoid outages. When outages do, and I cross fingers, do hopefully go away in the next 5 to 6 years, there's also energy arbitrage which can be used, which battery storage can help you with. So the same batteries can be used to be charged either from your solar or even from the grid during the low tariff periods. And then during the high tariff periods, the peak periods, you can offset your usage from Eskom and rather discharge from the batteries instead of using the expensive power that that's available on grid at that point. So long-winded answer, but I hope I've responded. I see a hand up from Johan.
Ash, thank you for the presentation. CEO of FASA, the Abalone Farmers Association. The expansion of the grid. So theoretically, one can go off the grid with solar, wind, and battery storage. But for the country as a whole, for the smaller guys, for diverse operations, the expansion of the grid, how is that going to happen? We know the Northern Cape hasn't got grid capacity, but there's an abundance of natural energy resources available. So just what are the plans in terms of, I know the Western Cape is fast approaching capacity, and then I believe the Eastern Cape, where we have these natural resources. So my question is, where's the money going to come from to expand that grid, and what sort of time frame are we looking at? Thanks.
Sure. So the Northern Cape, the Western Cape, and the Eastern Cape are actually currently sitting with zero grid capacity available. It's not just the Northern Cape anymore, it's also Western and Eastern Cape. You would have seen in the last rebid round, there were no wind projects awarded because all of them were in the Western and Eastern Cape and no one had grid capacity. Eskom's transmission development plan does plan new corridors that would create more capacity in the Northern Cape, in the Western Cape, and Eastern Cape. This, however, is a 10-year plan. So we aren't going to see any alleviation of that grid constraint in the next 2, 3, maybe at the start of 5 years, we would start to see some impact from there. But it's very much a long-term plan for Eskom. It requires, I had it in one of my earlier slides, and we can check the presentation. There's around 8,000 kilometers of power lines that need to be built. The funding for this type of development is coming at the moment from Eskom, but the independent power producers that need to connect their large power projects in these regions are also contributing to the grid investment that's required. To give you an example, our 260 megawatt project in Daar, we've needed to spend $25 million to get that, not as part of the solar and wind project, but as part of the substation and grid lines that need to be built just to get that project connected to the grid. So I think the positive that's coming out is that where the public sector or where Eskom isn't able to deploy the capital or get it done on time, the private sector, to get the job done, is also starting to invest in these assets as well. And bear in mind that's the investment that's done from the private sector on those substations, on those power lines. It's not power lines that it's not substations that we own once they're commissioned. As soon as it's commissioned, we hand it over to Eskom, and it belongs to the state. It belongs to them to operate.
Thanks, Ash.
Pleasure. Peter, I see a question.
Hey, Ash, yeah, thank you. Very, very good solutions, innovative solutions. Well done, I must say. If we would like to get in contact with you and properly have members that want to get in contact, is it best to get in contact with you, or do you have specific details per province, or what's the best to get in contact with TotalEnergies?
So the last slide of this presentation, I'll add in my work number on that as well, but you have my email address. But I think your TotalEnergies representative from the agri sector can also loop me into any requirements that you need. And myself, particularly as a coordinator, if your requirement is on the large side, I will bring in the specialist utility scale team. If it's on the behind the meter side, I will bring in the specialist guys that will design a solution for your particular requirement. But use myself or the Total Agri team that you would already be familiar with as your first point of contact, and I'll be happy to respond.
Thanks, Ash. Can you just show that slide again, please?
Sure. And I mean, I'll share the entire pack with you as well. I see we're 2 minutes over. Thanks so much for your participation, everyone. If you do have questions, I am contactable anytime outside of this as well. Drop me an email, and I will make sure to get back to you. Thanks so much for your participation. I hope it was interesting for you as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a good long weekend.
Thank you, Ash. I will be circulating the presentation and the recording to everyone. So as soon as you send it to me, Ash, I'll also just include your contact details so everyone can see it easily. So thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you for everyone who joined, and I hope you will have a lovely long weekend.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Enjoy the weekend.
Bye.
You bye-bye.